Tom, g'day. So where is this push to cut isolation periods coming from?
Yeah, Joe, it's primarily coming from the New South Wales Premier Dominic Perrottet, who signalled he'd like to see an end to mandatory isolation altogether at some point and wants to use this as a step towards that, to reduce the mandatory isolation periods currently in place from 7 days down to 5. Now, this will be discussed at National Cabinet this afternoon. It would move us more in line with countries like the United States and Canada, where they have those 5-day rules already in place, but there is some hesitation and reluctance coming from some state and territory leaders who want to hear what public health officials think about all this and what the potential consequences of such a change might be. So it's expected the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Paul Kelly, will give some advice to National Cabinet this afternoon. One issue, though, where there is broad agreement is around COVID isolation payments. Now, state and territory leaders do want to see those payments extended beyond the end of September when they're due to come to an end. These are the payments made to people who are being forced to isolate to compensate them for missing out on work. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has been asked his thoughts on this morning and whether the budget could accommodate that kind of extension. Granted, it would be quite expensive given case numbers and the number of people being forced to isolate at present. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
The budget's got some pretty serious constraints. You know, we've inherited a budget which is heaving with $1 trillion in Liberal Party debt. And so we've got to work out where we can get maximum value for money, maximum bang for buck in the commitments that we make. And I'm proud of the extension that we made, working closely with the state and territory leaders in the past. But I think the reality, accepted on all sides, is that that kind of support can't continue forever. It's also contingent on some of the other ways that we're responding to this COVID health challenge and economic challenge. And one of the issues at play there is the length of the isolation period. And again, not wanting to preempt the discussion that will happen in Sydney this afternoon, but that's a relevant consideration as well, I would have thought.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers speaking there in Sydney this morning. And Tom, he's going to be a busy man over the next couple of days with this big jobs summit happening in Canberra. What's happening with the guest list for that?
Yeah, the guest list has now been made public. It is bigger than expected. We expected around about 100 names. Instead, I guess like a wedding, it's blown out to about 143. There are some pretty familiar names on there, the sorts of people you would expect, particularly union leaders and the heads of key business groups. Some major CEOs are on the list too. The head of Qantas, Alan Joyce, the head of the Toll Group, Christine Holgate, Andrew Forrest from Fortescue, the mining billionaire, is also coming along too. Dylan Alcott, the Australian of the Year, he'll be there too as well. The opposition leader, Peter Dutton, of course, isn't attending and has already made a criticism of the list, suggesting there might be too great a union presence, suggesting union leaders may have too much sway over the conversation at the Job Summit. Here's what he had to say on that earlier.
Union coverage in the private sector is less than 10%, but at this summit we've got 33 union leaders out of 142 attendees. So there will be a very strong focus on the union movement. Now, that's the want of the Labor Party. They're the elected government. That's fine. But I don't think for small business people the hopes are very high as to what can be achieved. I mean, the ACTU claims around higher taxation, economy-wide bargaining, which will result in economy-wide strikes. It's not in businesses' interest. It's not in our economy's interest. It's not in the workers' interest either.
Joe, one thing to watch over the next couple of days, the Treasurer has flagged there might be some room to move around allowing pensioners to work more before their pension payments are affected. So that's something to watch as the Job Summit plays out.
And Tim, if you're likening that to a wedding, I'm wondering who the drunk uncle's going to be over the next couple of days. I'm not asking you to nominate anyone.
We'll not be speculating on that one.
Tom Lowrey there in Canberra.